The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Good afternoon. We're on Mannin Line today. Open line through until 1 o'clock. So apart from the weather, anything you'd like to talk about? What is going to be the future for the Douglas Lifeboat House and for the boat and for the crew? The RNLI is totally reliant on public donations and is working out what it needs to do, saying it understands the frustrations of the crew and remains absolutely committed to providing the capital with a new vessel and a suitable station. I don't know about you, doesn't that sound like management speak to you? Can you imagine if the crew of the lifeboat started using management speak to people in distress? We're absolutely committed to providing you with a rescue. We're working out your options and consulting our core values, and we do hope to be able to provide you with continued life. Can you imagine? Now, at the same time, there are calls for the Manx government to help if it's needed. So, what did the government have to say regarding the lifeboat? I mean, bearing in mind that the lifeboat and the Isle of Man, and particularly Douglas, absolutely synonymous. William Hillary is buried there. Well, anyway, this is what Tim Crookall, the DOI Minister, had to say.
A meeting between the Department and the Chief Executive, Mr Peter Sparks of the NLI, was held on the 25th of October 2024 to discuss the future location of both the RNLI crew accommodation and the lifeboat. Before this meeting, the Department has been in discussions with the NLI with the proposed options for the relocation of the crew accommodation and the vessel berth. These options are still under consideration by the RNLI.
A review is underway to work out the answer to what should replace the Mersey lifeboat, which is a veteran and due to be replaced next year anyway. We are naturally proud of our part in lifeboat history, part played by the founder Sir William Hillary. His statue gazes across Douglas Bay, and there's a plaque here to him outside bearing his image as well. The question is, and it was asked by MHK John Wannenberg, do the rescuers now need rescuing themselves?
I would fully expect them to have that consultation and evaluate where their needs are and address them appropriately. They are a charity after all, and they must spend their money wherever it's going to have the most effect. On the other hand, I, as a politician, I'm keen to understand if the steam packet, for example, has an accident off Marine Drive, what happens then? Who's going to come and help us then? And if Orsted goes ahead in the years to come with the wind farm, that's more dangerous for an accident than what we have now. So we've got to think of the future, and I think the RNLI has always had a huge part to play on the Isle of Man. And just because the boathouse is going to be downgraded or looking that way, I'm keen to make sure that they get every assistance they have or they can get from the Isle of Man government.
I'm tempted to say, doesn't the RNLI know who we are? I mean, surely. What on earth? How has it got this far? How has the Douglas Lifeboat House degraded so much that we're at the situation now where we're talking about whether or not there's going to be a lifeboat here? It sounds like it's going to be downgraded. Can you imagine? Could you have imagined this 5-10 years ago? Different world, isn't it? Obviously, Peel, Port Erin, Port St Mary and Ramsey roll on regardless, but there's a shadow over Douglas. Anyway, David's with us now. Hi, David.
On that subject, Andy, it's a shame and it's down to Parliament to do something about it. But I want to thank, really, for you passing on the messages to me, and I've slipped them to John, because John doesn't have internet service for where he is and so forth. I just want to thank people who have offered to help. I will get back to certain people who've given me their telephone numbers and stuff like that. John doesn't want to be an embarrassment to anybody. He just wants a fair crack of what's available in the Isle of Man, which I don't think there is anything. But anyway, I'll write to David Anderson and just not David Anderson, the fellow from North Douglas, and ask him, what is the strategy? We're still asking for the strategy, and nobody from government who I've been contacting has come back to me on how do we protect people who are falling off the rails. And can you imagine, the weather last night and today and tomorrow for a few days is terrible. But quickly, I just want to slip over to Manx Telecom and just find out really what is happening. I know the statement came out yesterday, breaking news. That's great from Manx Radio. But what about the government? What are they saying? We're led to believe by rumour and innuendo that Manx Telecom was offered to the Isle of Man government.
Apparently so.
Well, I was going to ask, do we know that for certain? Which department it was? What was the response on behalf of the government? Who we look at them to respond on our behalf? And wouldn't you think they would have had the decency to comment, and then the public can have their say? In a portfolio, we got the steam packet, fine. We're doing well, it's still at arm's length. We're a little bit worried about that, but we're getting somewhere. The housing situation is becoming a nightmare all the time because this arm's length organisation, and we get David Ashford in charge of, but we don't get much information out of it. What's going to affect the people? So why can't we find out, or why can't one of the politicians bring something up and say, what was the statement? Where did it go to? Was it legit from Manx Telecom, or it's a parent company that owns the share value in it? But it's based on the island. Can you imagine if suddenly, I'm not saying it's just yesterday, if a Chinese entrepreneur said, right, I'll buy Manx Telecom and it's operating in the Isle of Man, would we be worried?
Well, it'd be nice to hear more about this, and also, as you say, whether or not and on what terms the Manx Telecom's owned by a private equity company called Basalt Investment Partners. They bought it 5 years ago, so it's an investment company basically. As everything, they're just making. They can basically use the money made from the fact that we use Manx Telecom. It's a bit like the people who used to own the steam packet did. It was treated as a cash cow. They took all the money and then sold it on. This is what's happened to Manx Telecom.
Yeah, but you look at all the providers too, and I'll openly admit I went to Shure because it was slightly cheaper, and I thought I got a better service on the internet, and I'm with a provider that's on Ireland that provides my internet connection and stuff like that. So the worry for me, and I'm sure the businesses on the island, especially the gambling institutions there too, they want security. They want reassurance. They want to make sure that things are going to happen when it's a snowy day, that we're still connected.
Yeah,
all right.
We'll see. And by the way, I must say, I mean, on your behalf as well, thanks to everybody who's got in touch regarding John. And what worries me, David, is that there will be other people apart from John. Now, John happens to be very lucky in having somebody like you, who we all know is like a terrier when he gets hold of something. So that's great. But there will be other people who don't have somebody to represent them and advocate for them. And that's what worries me. And the fact that you haven't had much luck with the government, what does this say for other people?
Yeah, and I mentioned the other day I went to Rob Collis's surgery, spoke about the issue, getting him all the information, and I've just got to clear some of the things back at the minute, because if you transmit something on, there's always a warning from government. This is private and confidential, you can't transmit it to anybody else. But what happens if somebody's at risk? You break that line, don't you? And do something.
Okay, all right. Appreciate it, David. Thanks.
Bye.
Good to hear from you. It's 16 minutes past 12. Well, this is the story about Manx Telecom being sold to Jersey Telecom. At the moment, we haven't had official confirmation about it. We haven't heard from government or Manx Telecom or Jersey Telecom. But anyway, I mean, the story is it's now been owned by half a dozen people. Historically, in the Isle of Man, telephones have been part of the British GPO, which became British Telecommunications when it was sold off. and operated as part of the Liverpool telephone district. In 1985, the government announced it would award a 20-year licence to operate the telephone system on a tender process. Now, as part of this, BT created a Manx-registered subsidiary called Manx Telecom. So Manx Telecom was a British Telecom subsidiary. Cable and Wireless pitched at the same time, but didn't get it, but Manx Telecom did. In 2001, Manx Telecom became part of O2. Do you remember O2? It was the demerger of BT's wireless operations from the BT Group. So it went from British Telecom subsidiary Manx Telecom to be part of O2, and then Telefonica, the Spanish company, bought it in 2006. In 2010, Telefonica sold it to a private investor company, a private equity people, HG Capital, who bought the majority stake alongside a telecoms management company, CPS Partners. HG Capital indicated the enterprise value at the time was about $240 million. What's that? £160 million. It was floated on the AIM market, the kind of mini stock market, and in 2019, a private equity investor, Basalt Investment Partners, completed their acquisition. So what started way back when as part of the British GPO, then BT, then O2, then Telefonica, then HG Capital, now Basalt, you get the picture. People keep buying it along the way. Much like Ankala bought Manx Gas to basically make something out of their investment. I'm just wondering, by the way, and we'll find this out, who owns the infrastructure? Who owns the cables? As in, the government announced that there was a 20-year licence in 1985 as part of the tender process. So who actually owns the cables and the telegraph poles and the boxes? Who owns that? And if Jersey Telecom buy it, do they get to own all that, our infrastructure? Anyway, I just wonder what your thoughts are regarding that and where you think we stand. I don't know whether you picked up your Manx Telecom telephone directory that came through the letterboxes over the past few days with that chilling notice that says, this is the final telephone directory. The final telephone directory. My word, we do live in a different world, don't we, nowadays? Regarding don't let the government get involved in the lifeboat station. How many examples of incompetence with major products do we need? I don't think there's any danger of the government getting involved in the RNLI, but it'd be nice to know who owns the station and the land it's on. Surely it's worth the government looking at Manx Telecom just on profit alone. It's got to be a goer, says Tony. And again, which part of government do you think would run Manx Telecom? Employs about, just over 300 people. Big, impressive place up on the business park, isn't it? So 300-odd people. We don't quite know what the books look like, do we? And we don't know how much they're paying their investors. So what sort of premium people are getting. Considering its history, surely there's an obligation by the DOI to provide suitable berth space and accommodation for the RNLI. Their history is synonymous with the Isle of Man, and the question should be asked who takes priority over them on that particular berth if space is required. Thank you, NT. We'll try and find out. Government's always behind the curve. The DEFRA Minister should make a statement about contingencies should UK farmers strike and create food supply shortages, not wait until there is a situation. Whoever's handing out road advice, wherever your advice comes from, need to get a grip on reality. The odd road here, the odd road there may be slippery. People are going too fast for the conditions. Putting the salt trucks on the road will be cheaper than police going to accidents. Thank you, says Paul. You can stop ranting, Paul, now. Thank you for that. Remember that accident and the road closure in Crosby for 2-3 hours or so. I was in a pub yesterday. Oh, Derek, well done. For lunch, and all the diners were pensioners. So if they keep on hitting older folks' income, watch out for the hospitality trade to fall apart. That makes fiscal sense, Dr. Allinson. Put the money back in the NI fund that was taken out and cut down on staff and grandiose schemes we can't afford, says Derek. Thank you, Derek. Which schemes are we talking about in particular? What happens to all the millions the taxpayer paid out regarding the fibre rollout? Will it be paid back, says David. It would be nice to know, wouldn't it? Will the new owners of Manx Telecom, Jersey Telecom, owned by the Jersey government, will they own our infrastructure? Will they own the trunking and the wires and the fibre optics and everything? In the post comes unwelcome news that MiCards are being scrapped, says Helen. Many depend on the cash, especially as there are so few banks, and we depend on helpers and friends for many things. Also, lots of little social groups meet when £1 or £2 go into a collection box. Not all of us find banking difficult due to various disabilities. The government becomes less and less caring. There's only one working bank below the line between Douglas and Peel. And that bank is Isle of Man Bank in Port Erin, of course. Thank you, Helen. Manx Gas is run from Jersey. Isle of Man Bank is run from Jersey. Manx Telecom may well be taken over by Jersey. When will Jersey take over governing the Isle of Man? Well, you never know, do you? Gee, thank you for that. 313 could also be. You know they've got their own airline in the Channel Islands, don't you? Aurigny Air. Mind you, they had a look, didn't they? Came to the Isle of Man to take a look. We don't know whether anything came of that. I see that Poseidon MR1 is on patrol again off Ramsey at 2,150 feet. I wonder if the Russian vessel is still around, says Chris in the north. Not spotted the Yantara lately, and no sleeper Russian spy got in touch with me yesterday. I was expecting a note, or at least a bottle of vodka. Government treats the NI as a cash cow, says that correspondent. And thanks also. Do you think Manx Telecom are trying to sell to Jersey before the Russians cut the cable? Says Rich. I think we're fairly safe, Rich. Thank you for that. Maybe the steam packet could take over the Douglas lifeboat and the staff and maintain it. Thank you, Will. We don't know. Maybe, perhaps, it will be a first, wouldn't it? A private enterprise lifeboat house. Here's a note in that says, I was under the impression that the all emergency vehicles... Oh, sorry, I've got a picture. Somebody sent a picture in of a police car off the road somewhere. Thank you for that. Douglas Lifeboat should be the flagship of the fleet, sliding down the boathouse into action. What an embarrassment this is to the Isle of Man, says Tomo. And listening to Mannin Line today on the RNL line driving along the prom as I did reminds me that this government has little sense of history or imagination, Dave says. It's deplorable and, frankly, it's distressing. It's interesting. The people in government obviously have to look to the future, and history has its place. But where do you think history should be? Should we be defined by our history, i.e. kind of rely on everything from our history, or do we have to do things for the future? Be modern, concentrate on modernity. It's often mentioned that there's a kind of paradox, really, between the people who are obsessed with the Isle of Man heritage when the people who created that heritage were anything but obsessed with the past. I mean, the Victorians would knock anything down to put something up that has now become Victorian. So if we adopted the Victorian attitude, the Victorian mentality, we wouldn't be bothered about heritage, would we?
Immerse yourself in the magic of the Manx Telecom Christmas Emporium. Treating yourself or searching for the perfect gift? We've got you covered with magical savings of up to £703 on our Apple and Samsung tech bundles. Available over 36 months. Get smiles from the whole family with jolly good deals on Apple, Samsung, gaming and smartphone gadgets and gizmos. Visit us in store or head to mt.im/Christmas for details, terms and conditions.
The festive season really begins when you choose your real Christmas tree at Robinson's.
Visit Robinson's Christmas Tree Park for a superb selection, including traditional, non-drop and potted Christmas trees, along with magical wreaths and mistletoe, with netting and delivery service available. The excitement of Christmas starts with the tree. So come along and find your perfect one from Robinson's Christmas Tree Park on Cool Road. Opens this Saturday.
Your wish is granted.
Because it's Panto time at the Gaiety Theatre.
Oh, no, it isn't.
Oh, yes, it is. Stage Ed presents the classic Panto Dick Whittington, specially adapted for the Isle of Man this Christmas. With fun for all the family, as Dick Whittington and his Manx cat Tommy go to find out if the streets really are paved with gold in Laxey. Can Tommy help Dick become the Lord Mayor of Laxey, or will Longtail King stop him? And more importantly, will Sarah the cook ever sort out her soggy bottoms? Book now at villagaiety.com or call the box office on 600 555. Sponsored by Zedra Isle of Man and supported by Manx Radio.
Coming up, we have another winning weekend here on Manx Radio. And this weekend, we're giving you the chance to win a £100 fuel voucher to spend at any Ellen Van and Fuels outlet. Ellen Van and Fuels is your first port of call when you need to top up your car. They also offer a great shopping experience too. To win, all you need to do is listen out for our winning question, which we'll ask on air right across the weekend. And once you've heard it, text your answer to 166 177. Make this your winning weekend with Ellen Van and Fuels and your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Hey, fast am I, 28 minutes now before 1. Thanks for all the messages. Got lots of messages to get through today. And including a message in from, let me see, this was from Rita. Thank you, Rita. Couldn't read what it was there. Rita says, what's the story on the National Insurance Fund? I keep hearing a lot about it. Is this money ours or is it the government's? Well, the Treasury Minister's calling for a national conversation on how to preserve the National Insurance Fund. 4 options are being considered. Now, yesterday, Dr. Allinson presented a document to Tynwald outlining the scale of the issue and potential ways to resolve it. I don't know whether you were listening to AM 1368 and the debate that went on. Potentially, he's talking about scrapping the triple lock pension, which could help stop the national insurance pot being exhausted by 2047, which is 23 years away. But the document as presented didn't seem to create resounding confidence in Tynwald members. This is what they had to say.
But it is ridiculous, frankly. It's ridiculous to reduce the NI fund, to save the NI fund and National Insurance Scheme.
That's Chris Thomas.
Doesn't stack up. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You know, we are in difficulties because of taking away investment returns in the last decade, but we're also in a much worse situation because 40 million was taken out for the hospital 22 or 3 years ago, and nearly 100 million or around that was taken out for employment support during COVID. We're in a worse position because of all of those sorts of things.
If the increases applied to pensions are going to impact pensions negatively, perhaps the department should look alternatively to reviewing tax allowances. In the 2023 OECD report, Pensions at a Glance, it reports that half of the OECD countries provide either higher personal allowances or extra tax credits to older people than to working age individuals. Noting, however, that in many OECD countries, this additional relief is phased out for older people with higher incomes, and then that approach protects those on lowest pension incomes. Perhaps this could be part of the considerations outside of the National Insurance Fund to protect the fund itself.
Like Mr. Speaker, I was very concerned about the language in part of the 4 principles where it's stated around investment of the fund will be restricted. That sounds great with the headline, and then you read the paragraph, and where it says that, obviously notwithstanding the existing restrictions and legislation, they will only be invested in the following policy areas: health and social care, education, employment, or in support of the economy more generally. Now, if that isn't a wide-ranging term, I don't know what is. I think the only people who won't be able to apply that to is the poor police force. I think anyone else, it's open game.
That was some members of the Tynwald yesterday talking about exactly what's going to happen with this. It will affect you, it will affect me, it will affect an awful lot of people, whether paying in or taking out now and in the future. And it has got to be got right. So any thoughts on this? Please warn your listeners about scammers purporting to be Isle of Man Bank Fraud Department. I had a call from a young lady last night. The number they gave begins with 0203. So don't do it. Says Peter, don't do it. They do that periodically, but just watch out for that. More messages, and it's because it's a shame, really, because the profits from Manx Telecom will be going off the Isle of Man. The government's missed a source of revenue because we still want our phones. Surely we could have done this instead of increasing taxes. Well, again, we don't know the books, do we? We really don't know how much Manx Telecom makes or doesn't make. And presumably the government's had a look at it. Now, the truth of the matter, we don't know what the Manx Telecom sale involves. They were shoving fibre cables through drains under roads, and I caught them on private land doing damage to private property during the lockdown. Probably no public liability insurance for the damage they've done, says Crystal. Well, these are Crystal's words. Smart meters aren't insured either, so watch out for Manx Utilities. Watch out. Smart meters aren't insured. Aren't they, Crystal? And Mark says the ideal of Government of Jersey taking over the Isle of Man sounds an excellent idea. Can we have their weather? Mark, I don't know. With all the banks closing down, I presume you can't apply for a loan or a mortgage with online banking. So how do customers manage short-sighted behaviour from the banks? I don't know. I mean, Lloyd's has a presence on the Isle of Man. Isle of Man Bank has a presence on the Isle of Man. Barclays has got a presence, so presumably you have to make your way there to do it. It's just that they're not local anymore. And that point about there not being a bank, just being one functioning bank below the line between Douglas and Peel is chilling, really, isn't it? The plans to redevelop Parade Street in Douglas have been announced. The Manx Development Corporation wants to build a multi-storey car park and hopes to have the application lodged next year. Plans to redevelop Parade Street into a multi-use, multi-storey car park have been suggested a couple of times over the past year or so. Manx Development Corporation, the people who are developing Upper Douglas around Domain Road, the back end of Domain Road and the old nurses' home, still not finished yet, which is behind the plans. This is the arm's length company. Sole shareholders, the Treasury, and also the company its managing director is Dane Harrop, who says, following a pause of works to reassess the final scope, MDC has re-engaged its design team with a view to lodging a planning application for Parade Street car park in the first half of next year. Now, Parade Street is the site adjacent to the Millennium Bridge next to the Steam Packet Company offices. It's managed by the DOI and was used in recent years as a border control point during COVID. The proposal to redevelop the site falls under the wider regeneration plans for Lower Douglas and follows the 2014 Tynwald-approved master plan for the area. That includes North and South Quay, as well as the Middlemarch site, Lord Street and Parade Street. What's it going to look like? Well, a lot of glass. It's big, relatively tall. You can go to manxradio.com. It's all on there. And hopefully we'll chat at some point in the future to the Manx Development Corporation and see what it is they're going to do. But we've had one message in that just says they're building a big multi-storey car park at Parade Street. Why is that? Is it because they took all the car parking spaces away from the prom when they redeveloped the prom and made it a traffic calming scheme? Well, that's one thought, isn't it? Cherry's on now. Hi, Cherry.
I just thought I'd let you know. I got a letter today, which a lot of other people will have got, about the MiCard.
Yeah.
And I phoned them up because we got a form to fill out. And the MiCard doesn't finish till December next year. And I said to the man, well, if we fill this in now, does that mean... He said, yeah, if you fill it in now, it goes straight to the bank straight away. So I'm not filling mine out till next year, and I told him that.
Would you prefer to keep it?
Yeah, because, I don't even live near a bank. At least I can get down to the post office. And it means if I've got to go into town to get some cash,
yeah,
and I'm not a well person, and he said to me, I said, so I don't need to fill it out. He said, well, I'm just letting people know if they fill that letter out today, their money will be automatically going into the bank straight away. And it doesn't say that on the form. It just says that to fill this form out with your bank details. But it does say on the letter that the MiCard doesn't finish till the December 2025. But if you fill that form out now, your money automatically goes into the bank from whenever you fill the form out.
Right, so you've got until when? September next year?
Well, I said to him, when do I have to fill it out? I said, because I might fill it out. I always said, you'll have to do it a few months before then. But as soon as they get that letter, the money automatically goes into the bank.
All right. Well, thanks for telling us that, Chair. I think lots of people will find out. Which post office do you use at the moment?
Union Mills.
Right, okay.
But my bank is in Douglas.
It's they say it's not many people who've got MiCards. As one of the not many people, what do you think?
Well, I was in the post office today, and there's a queue of people every Wednesday. So, but I'm just letting people know if they fill that form out now and post it, the money will automatically go into the bank, because I phoned the man up myself.
Okay. All right, Jerry, good to hear from you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, bye.
Cheers now, 22 minutes now before 1. Just thinking about the parking issue in Castletown Square, says James on 623. I've had a connection with Castletown for 34 years. The current crop of commissioners are the most ineffective I've ever known in my adult lifetime. Time to be a commissioner, James, that's what it is. Government always looks to Jersey for being a competitor for business, says 313. So our government must be really failing us if energy and banking and now telecoms will move to Jersey. I think they'll keep the name, won't they? Maybe they'll call it M-Telecom. Too many people are employed by government, says Roy. So why aren't we having an urgent cull? If the pension pot has been swindled away by the government, well, that's Roy's word, and it's not there for me, there will be blood. Sounds like a threat, Roy. We take the point, though, and I'm sure it wasn't a literal threat. Restricting pensions, the new boat, the prom, the landing stage, expanded government. The government should look to savings within, says John on 557. HSBC and Santander are mortgage providers, and they have manned officers on the Isle of Man, says Sue. Have you heard anything about Spring Valley rebuilding of new homes? No, I haven't, 797. If you could tell us about that, that'd be terrific. DOI is defending its decision to close a section of the mountain road next month. Northern Chamber of Commerce called for planned resurfacing work to be postponed till next year, when it would have a less detrimental impact on the financial and mental well-being of local businesses. The chair, Keith Dalrymple, wrote an open letter to Tim Crookall, MHK, the Infrastructure Minister, earlier this week. He's calling for the closures to be postponed until the new year, when they'll have a less detrimental impact. Keith Dalrymple warned that closures could harm retailers who rely heavily on pre-Christmas trade, and has accused the department of failing to consider the big picture and the consequences for individuals and their livelihoods. Well, if you're in business in the north, then do get in touch. Is this affecting you? Is it a big problem? Text, email, call and WhatsApp. I got a letter from Lloyds Bank to say both Douglas and Ramsey are closing soon. Is that right, Muriel? Send us a copy of that. Take a photo. Send it, would you? Well, Ramsey is closing soon, but I've certainly not heard about Douglas. Do you remember at one time, how many branches of Lloyds did there used to be in Douglas? Now it's down to one. Times change, don't they? Why is Laurie Hooper worried about Telecom being sold when it's been run by multiple companies all over the world? He makes it sound like Jersey is set to invade, and maybe the Channel Islands have got together to take over, as Island Energy are there, and also the gas as well. There's a conspiracy for you. We'll all be speaking French next, says Dick, or Gerrier. Can you be an Isle of Man resident and bank with a bank on the UK via online? Well, lots of these new banks you can, can't you? The new banks, the Swallow and Revolut and everything, you can do all that via them. But it is quite right, times change. And we have to go along with them, because otherwise you just get caught along. I've spoken to... this is a lady called Emma who said, has EVF and Tesco resolved their differences at Little Switzerland? Apparently there was a parking dispute between EVF and Tesco's contractor, Greylaw, who were parking on the yellow lines as you exit the petrol station in Little Switzerland. It was causing issues for customers of the petrol station and residents and visitors of the Little Switzerland estate. EVF said they made contact with Tesco and the contractor, but have had no success. I think maybe some patrols from the DOI could possibly work or make it a disc zone. Nobody should be parking on yellow lines in the first place. If anybody knows whether this has been resolved, I've had a couple of messages in about this little contretemps in Little Switzerland by the EVF petrol station. Know anything about it?
Hello, Isle of Man. At Co-op, we believe it's wrong to lower prices on things you buy least. So we lower the prices on the things you buy most, as well as giving you other exclusive member benefits. Plus, we now deliver to the whole island, so great deals can be delivered to your doorstep. So join Co-op to become not just a member, but an owner, and have your say on how we're run. Co-op, owned by you, right by you. £1 membership fee applies. See full T's and C's at coop.co.uk/terms.
Walk through the Christmas wonderland at Ramsey Garden Centre for a magical range of trees, decorations, unique gifts and much more, including the widest range of indoor and outdoor lights. Christmas at Ramsey Garden Centre, open 7 days a week.
It's the Douglas Christmas light switch on Thursday, November 21st, which means it's the season to be shopping. But if you're finding it difficult to get out and about on the run-up to Christmas, then Circa can help. Our team of Shop Mobility buddies are standing by to help you get the best out of your festive Douglas shopping trips. And as the shops open late night on Thursdays, so will we. For more details about Circa Shop Mobility Services, click circa.org.im. Sponsored by the Manx Lottery Trust as a delegated partner of the National Lottery Community Fund.
Christmas, twinkling lights, a nip in the air, gatherings with friends and family, and the perfect time to enjoy a delicious glass of Bush's Manx beer. Available in all the island's finest establishments. And remember, Bush's is the only brewery supporting Manx farmers by using locally grown barley in our brews. So enjoy a Bush's this Christmas and take a taxi or bus home. Bush's, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Beer.
This Christmas, we're spreading festive cheer and championing local businesses by encouraging you to shop local. Here at Manx Radio, we're teaming up with Love Manx, who are running a Shop Local Christmas campaign to give you the chance to win a £100 voucher to spend at any independent local business. From Monday, send a text to 166 177 and tell us your favourite local business or producer and what festive goodies are catching your eye this year. And we'll announce the winner on Feel Good Friday on the 29th of November. Think local first this Christmas with Love Manx and your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Thanks for dropping by today. I've got a MiCard, so my money will be paid into my bank. I live in Derby. And this week they've decided to close my bank, Lloyd's in Ramsey. Quite what do I do? 585. It's a modern world, isn't it? 585. What's going on in the island, they say? If you know, tell me. I've said before, Manx Telecom sold their internet to an Australian company years ago, says Graham. Is that true? And that's the other point, is if Manx Telecom is getting sold, it just depends how much, whether it is Jersey Telecom or not. We think it is. What's going to happen to ManxNet users? Everyone who's got a ManxNet internet address. We wait and we'll find out what's going to happen. How are the flights with all this cold weather? Says Des. Dan climate. Doesn't climate change. Oh, sorry. You're all complicated for me there, Des. You're all scrambled up at once. I just had a look at the published notices for Ronalds Way Airport, says this correspondent. And it appears that radar has been out of service at Ronaldsway since October. This is the Ronaldsway published notices. It appears that the primary surveillance radar, that means you'll not be able to see aircraft on the radar unless their transponder is turned on. This is crazy. This has been like this for such an extended time. This was a main contributing factor to 911. The lack of primary surveillance radar. So from a security perspective, this is very concerning, says this correspondent. Why hasn't the public been informed by the airport director concerning the amount of money the public spent on this radar? And it appears it doesn't work. We'll check this out. Do we even have an airport director? Well, we have an interim one, don't we? Gary Cobb is leaving for pastures new. And I think it's Jeff Pugh, who's the air traffic control boss. He's the interim airport director. We haven't heard what's happening there. But anyway, we'll try and find out. It appears that the primary surveillance radar has been out of service since October. That message in from a correspondent. The issue at Tesco Victoria Road is the Tesco trailers are 40 feet long, whereas the ShopRite ones, hitherto there, were 30 feet long. They're too big to get in and around EVF to the back of the store. That's the whole problem. So has it been sorted out with Tesco's contractor, which is Greylaw, and EVF, who've got the petrol station there? Swap banks to Barclays in Ramsey and Douglas, says John. Oh, that's what you need to do, is it? And a message in concerning this new Parade Street car park as well. We should have seen this coming all along. They give with one hand and take away with the other. We got a new prom, we got the car parks taken away, and now we're going to get a multi-storey car park, a nice big one, nice and high, and no doubt it'll be an app to pay. Well, you don't know that for certain, do you? Well, I mentioned when we started the show that maybe this is the time that you step up, because many people call Mannin Line with their own opinions about what should happen in government. Well, in March next year, there's a LegCo election, Legislative Council, the upper chamber, the scrutiny chamber. Applications for a position in LegCo are now open, elections scheduled to take place in March next year. You can put yourself forward now directly. There was a former requirement which needed a nomination from an MHK. You can now step forth and take your place. MHKs will still retain sole voting power on candidates with no direct public vote involved. Candidates must secure a proposer and a seconder. You've got to get a proposer and seconder from MHKs, but you can put yourself forward. They don't have to put you forward. The application period closes on the 9th of January, so you've got a while to think about it, with a conference on the 24th of January. MHKs will have until the 13th of February to propose or second their preferred candidates. Hustings are planned for the 24th of February, followed by the election on the 4th of March. Swearing in for the successful candidates takes place on the 11th of March. So, this new revised process will look and feel like a conventional recruitment process, making it more accessible for those less acquainted with Tynwald's procedures. Do you think now is the time for you to step forward and do something about it? Become an MLC. Lots of people have been talking about it. Who's it going to be?
When the Mannin Line's not on air, call Manx Radio to leave your opinion for broadcast on 682 631.
Text, email, call and WhatsApp. And thank you to Eva, who just said, I'm so happy that Travelodge is coming to the Isle of Man. It's one of my favourite hotel chains in the UK. The company's first hotel on the Isle of Man will be at the Villiers Square site in Douglas, next to that big hole that's been there for nearly 30-odd years. But it's at last they're doing something with it, which will be it'll be something for the future, won't it? It's hoped proposals will improve the resilience of the food sector. You may have noticed that this problem that they're having in the UK, or possibly having with farmers in the UK, may affect us. The Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture has unveiled a series of ambitious plans to strengthen the Isle of Man's food security, focusing on boosting local production and tackling challenges within the sector. Claire Barber set goals to achieve a 10% increase in locally produced food by September 2028. Close 90% of skill gaps in food production by 2026 and expand food storage capacity by 15% within that time frame. 10% increase in locally produced food by December 2028. Now, you just wonder what sort of food we're going to be producing. Is this spuds? Is it veg? Well, it can't be milling wheat because no milling wheat's been planted. Ever since Ramsey Bakery closed down, Timwell Mills have got years' worth of the stuff stored there. So what are we going to do? What sort of food are we going to... Is it going to be beef? Well, we know what's happening at the meat plant. Is it going to be sheep? Are we all just going to be eating more Lockton lamb? Lamb burgers? Or maybe a commercial pig farm? Well, this is what Claire Barber's saying about it. This is apparently what's going to happen. Did you hear what Chris Robertshaw said recently? Chris Robertshaw was talking about this government being soft. He said it would, that this government that we have... Now, remember, Chris Robertshaw's been involved in government before. Former Minister, Policy and Reform, says the key objective for the government's got to be achieving balance in finances and living within the Isle of Man's means.
They really must get a grip of this issue about how we run a government that we're able to pay for. As I say, towards the beginning of this conversation, I was talking about where we were in 1969 when I first started work, and the significant number of the MHKs then had come into politics later in life with the cuts and bruises of their life's experiences and the mistakes they'd made, and were delivering their best efforts for a nation, the Manx nation, that was desperately short of money and struggling to find ways forward. And it was supported by a much smaller civil service with long experience and, again, exactly the same heart and determination to get things right, and they did a good job. But actually, over the years, we've got softer and softer. Easy money's allowed government to get bigger, more distracted from the key issues, and now, we're now coming back to first principles that we're not living within our means, and how do we do it?
That was Chris Robertshaw. I think the eyesore park building that was the KFC behind Villiers Square should be compulsorily purchased, and the space could be redeveloped as part of the Villiers Square project, says Jason. Well, we'll find out, and we'll be back tomorrow with another Open Line. Thanks to Chris on the phones today.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation station. This is Manx Radio.
Kelly's Eye, brought to you by Ellis Brown Architects.
Peter, what's Kelly's Eye looking at today?
I'm looking at concrete screen blocks.
Screen wall blocks, yes. They were handmade, and I think they only had about 3 moulds or 4 moulds, so production took a long time.
Yeah, they're a foot square, and then they've got this sort of pattern in the middle like a diamond shape.
Yeah.
But it's curved, so when you put the blocks together, when you put 4 together, you then get a circle and half circles.
That's right, and it's quite an attractive appearance, really.
It is. But anyway, they're here, and they're there for a purpose. They're for ventilation into the underside of a building, and the underside is sort of used as a garage come store. And of more recent times, this bright green and white sign has gone up which says Ty Ellen, and above that it says Isle of Man Art Society.
Was it a sort of industrial building originally, or what?
No, going way back on this site was the builder's yard of Fred Callow, the builder, who built a lot of the houses here in Palatine Road and York Road. And rather like Alex Gill, he used a plot in between for his builder's yard, and therefore it was convenient and didn't have to go elsewhere. In fact, his first workshop was the old tram shed off the promenade from the horse trams.
Really?
Because that was at the bottom of Summer Hill, and the horse trams went in one side and out the other, and then at night they closed the doors. The Jehovah's Witnesses purchased the building that was here. That it wasn't his old one. We're talking about 1973, and so in March 73 they were going to convert it, and in February 73 they said, nope, we're going to pull the lot down and start again. And so they did, and so they built this building, which gave them the Gospel Hall up above. I mean, looking at it now, you'd never have thought, this was a church or a religious meeting place. And then, of course, a few years ago, if you remember, they built themselves, literally over a weekend, a new church, a new hall down at the bottom of Belmont Hill.
An extraordinary thing, that appearing in no time.
Yeah, I mean, people came from across to help them out, but the whole thing just grew out. This then came up for sale, and the Isle of Man Arts Society were looking for a headquarters, and it proved ideal for them. It's tucked away here, and I'm sure an awful lot of people don't know it exists.
Well, I suppose the art world to some extent will know, but it's not much of a picture in itself, is it?
Art is in the eye of the beholder.
Many of the most iconic buildings around the island have been designed by Ellis Brown Architects. Keep up with Ellis Brown today on Facebook or via ellisbrown.in.
Part of island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.